I find music a useful distraction. A focus tool. Keeps the inner voice from wandering.
Hi, Tommy.
Hello, sir. How are you, JJ?
Very, very good. And I'm glad to be talking with you today. You suggested a great movie for us in November. When you looked at next month, how did you find your top picks? Why don't you tell us all about it?
I think I have some sort of internal Google alert set for David Fincher. Whenever he has a project coming out, I always sort of know about it. And so when I saw that The Killer was finally coming out, something that I've been anxiously looking forward to, it shot to the top.
That's awesome. The film board is going to be talking about The Killer in November, and it actually has been released in some select theaters around the country. Mm-hmm. I know that we know of folks in and around the world. We know of people in Australia that have seen it. We know of people in Arizona that have seen it, and it is set to be released on Netflix on Friday, November 10th, and that's when we're planning to talk about it. So look for a fresh podcast hot out of the oven that following week. But before we get to that tantalizing main course, we have a special tasty chat to share around with you today as Tommy and I welcome Director of Photography for The Killer, Erik Messerschmidt. Howdy, Erik.
Hi, guys. How's it going?
Hi. Good. Thank you so much for joining us. We're very excited to be talking to you.
Happy to be here.
What can you tell us about The Killer? How did you come to the film?
How did I come to the film? Well, where was I? I was shooting a film called Devotion in Georgia, mm-hmm. and David sent me a text message. He said, "Hey, do you want to shoot The Killer?" I said, "What's The Killer?" and he said, "Oh, I'll send you a script." Right, I'll send you a script. Take a look. And it went from there, and I read the script and called him back. I said, "Sure, I'll do this. Cool. When do we start?" And he said, "When are you available?" And we immediately went and scouted. So it was pretty quick. It was not a, when David calls you to do a movie, it's not a long conversation in your head about whether or not you're going to do it.
I was going to say a text from David is better than Tommy's Google alert for when a Fincher movie is coming available. But we're super excited to see it. We're planning on doing it sort of synchronous with the Netflix release. Are there any sequences, maybe without large spoilers, that were particularly challenging or rewarding that you think, from a DP standpoint, that we should keep an eye out for?
Well, I mean, the hopefully the movie is appreciated, as a whole. I mean, I think that nothing is ever easy. I mean, hopefully not. Actually, I mean, it's like I worry when the movie's easy. When something's easy, it's like, oh God, what are we doing wrong?
Yeah.
The movie is a film about precision and control. I mean, that's what the character's his sort of resting state is in one of extreme control, and so we use the camera very much to support that idea, hopefully. Awesome. And so we're trying to use the camera in ways that support his state of mind. So hopefully the audience picks up on that, but there's a fight sequence in the film that's quite elaborate, that's several minutes long, that was an extraordinary amount of work. So, we're certainly proud of that, but I hope people see the whole movie as one piece of work,
With precision and control, does that mean maybe the opposite of a lot of handheld? Is it very sort of locked down, a lot of sticks, a lot of...
Well, yeah, I mean, we experiment with that a bit, I mean, it's so much of cinema today is pointing the camera at actors and actors saying the words,
Right.
I just think I think cinema is more than that. It's and there are parts in the film anyway where we're trying to be very balletic, with the connection between Fassbender and the operator and the dolly grip, where they're really functioning as one unit. Almost like they're in a tango, so it's, Brian Osmond, the operator, and Dwayne Barr, the dolly grip, and Michael are rehearsing everything together so that they're in complete lockstep. There are other points in the film you'll see, when Michael's character makes mistakes or he's sort of out of his comfort zone, where we get into handheld and the camera breaks free a little bit, and hopefully that's
to show that discord.
Yeah, that's the idea anyway.
Right.
So it's and this is a character who really never lets anyone within his personal space, and suddenly the camera's there. So it's very much a conversation, I think, a cinematic conversation about subjectivity and objectivity, and we take the camera and we put it just a little bit closer than you normally would. And so we're sort of right inside his personal space all the time when he's alone, so there's bits of that. And I never really want the audience to pick up on the camera work. It's like, I hope they appreciate the movie, and then on a second or third viewing, they can go back and say, okay, what did they do here, et cetera. But it's like, my biggest fear is that it becomes the photography becomes distracting from the story,
That's kind of like editing. That sometimes if you really notice an editor's work, unless it was supposed to be that way, then they haven't done their job.
Yeah. It's like when you put on a great suit, hopefully someone doesn't, you don't walk down the street and someone says, God, who tailored this? It's like, you want people to say, wow, that looks great, and then the conversation can be, oh, who was the tailor? So it's, I kind of think of it that way. It's like you want the film to be appreciated as a movie.
I think we appreciate that kind of filmmaking too. Tommy and I are both big fans of some of your TV work as well. Some of the stuff that you've done with like Legion and Mindhunters. Legion, I mean, just speaking personally, Legion's like my favorite TV that I've seen in like the last 2 decades. So I'm
that was fun.
Huge fan of that.
Yeah. That was so much fun.
And like you're talking about there, they're both incredibly visual. And then what kind of differences do you have of working with Fincher or like Noah Hawley there, and they're doing that sort of incredibly visual setup, but then different styles between those types of things?
The joy of being a cinematographer is you get thrown into other people's machines. And I look for filmmakers who have generally have a kind of refined practice in place that they've already kind of developed. I think filmmakers over the course of their careers, they learn how they want to make films, and they start to curate their process in interesting ways, and they're all different. Every filmmaker's different, and the things they respond to, the things that the kind of nuts and bolts way they want to run the set, the way they interact with actors, the way they interact with a cinematographer, and in the case of David has a very refined, very specific methodology that is relatively consistent, film to film anyway. The movies are not consistent, the movies are all different, I think, and he certainly has aesthetic tendencies, I guess you could say. And Noah's the same way. Noah, responds to certain things. He sees the world in a different way, and so it's your job as a cinematographer to come into their world and try to see the world through their eyes. I think, and I really believe, the director is the boss, and it's the director's film, it's the director's project, and it's your job to support their intention.
Yeah, that's awesome. We look at Fargo and Legion and Mindhunters closer to filmmaking than traditional television as far as their visuals go. Is there any differences then when you think about working for like a streaming service to network TV or or FX than working on a film, when you think about the differences there?
Well, the biggest difference in every television show that I've done, a different director does every episode. Or sometimes they do, they'll do a pair of episodes, but that dramatically changes the dynamic. And it brings another person into the conversation, in the case of Legion anyway, and Mindhunter and Fargo, the showrunners, Noah and Fincher, were very involved in kind of the aesthetic, the corralling of the aesthetic, and the DP plays a bigger role in that position than you typically do on a film, because you're not experiencing a guest director coming in and saying, oh, well, I want to handhold the camera and run through the house, and you sort of have to say, well, we don't really do that on Fargo,
Right.
That's a very different dynamic than you would have on a feature film, where you're developing one thing with one director. It doesn't mean it's bad or good or bad, by the way. It's just different, and it's kind of the cool thing about series television too, is you get every 15 days or whatever, you get a fresh voice in there. I didn't see Star Wars projected until I was like 19 years old.
Yeah.
And but I probably saw it 50 times.
Yeah, I think it was the same for me, because I don't think I saw it until they brought him back.
Right.
you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. Exactly. You know, and by the way, it's not the original film, you know.
Right. It's different.
Um,
Yeah.
but you know, so the version of the film that I saw that I fell in love with that made me want to make movies was in the wrong aspect ratio on a VHS cassette on a CRT television, you know,
Right.
not letterboxed. And it made me want to make movies, you know. There are all sorts of reasons why the movie is a better experience in the theater, but I can't with good conscience come up and say you only need to watch movies in the cinema, you know. I mean, I think
Yeah.
we make movies to reach people. Most of the early experiences I had that made me love cinema were appreciated on home video just because of the resources I had as a 14-year-old kid, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so, you know, I can't stand on the soapbox and preach. You know, I will, however, say it's clearly a better experience in the cinema.
Mhm.
You know, I think that, assuming the cinema is properly maintained, by the way, I mean,
Right.
there's plenty the exhibitors can do to improve the experience for the audience and should do. You know, it's like there's more to running a cinema than changing the bulb when it burns out. You know,
Yeah.
um, you know, hopefully as a filmmaker you reach as many people as you can and you inspire them and you make them think about the world in a different way. And if that means they have to view it on their iPad, so be it. At least they see the movie. You know.
Yeah. Well, and that makes me think of Mank too, because, you know, we did a full episode on Mank for this show, for the film board when it came out. And of course, you know, it's in the middle of the pandemic and all these things, and everybody's kind of trying to figure out their space. And we all really loved it, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Working with black and white in Mank, you know, is there is that a limiting experience? Is that freeing? Is it both in some ways? You know, what with the different set of camera and lighting that goes along with black and white, how do you approach that
Well,
if we're thinking about different than, you know, the big screen to streaming?
I think cinema is about limiting.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, you know, it's what we do. You know, we we take the camera and we exclude things from the frame. You know, we
Right.
don't really it's I don't think of it as I'm including something in the frame. You
Sure.
know, it's all about what are we taking away, what are we eliminating. You know, it's the same way with lighting, but it's really that way with framing. You know, um and black and white is just an extension of that idea. You know, it's so I would say it's limiting in a in a creatively fulfilling way. You know,
Cool.
and we do the same thing when we shoot color. By the way, you know, it's like, you know, your iPhone captures every color imaginable that, you know, that your eye can see. It's really good at replicating human vision. And then you turn on cinematic mode and it starts to eliminate colors. You know what I
Right.
mean? I mean, that's what we do. You know, that's what we do with filtrations. We do color grading. That's what we do. So, you know, the black and white is just an extreme version of that, I think. But it, you know, it's, for me, I love the experience because it's such a, it distills photography down into the very bare elements of, you know, light, shadow, and shape and texture. And you're not, you know, you don't have to make the same. You're making very different visual choices. You know, it's why, like, you know, if you shoot something in color and then you convert it to black and white, it never looks great because
Yeah.
it's not the same thing. You know.
It's different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of my favorite sequences in Mank were I don't. Sorry, I started the sentence before I knew what to call it. Maybe those parlor sequences. It's those sort of
Uh-huh.
vicious circle of Dorothy Parker when they're all like in the sitting room, all sort of tearing
Sure.
each other apart. It's so deceptively simple because it seems so contained, and yet you have characters everywhere at all different parts, all relating to each other. That seems like a thrilling experience, and also a nightmare to try to figure out how to light and make it so the lighting isn't where, like you say, you don't notice who tailored the suit. It all works
Yeah.
seamlessly and perfectly, but I'm just blown away by sequences like that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I mean, you know, I don't really associate cinematography with photography.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think of it first like that. Like I don't think they're in the same. You know, when I think about photography, I think about the placement and position of the camera and what you're putting in the frame and how you're selecting that stuff. The lighting, the exposure part of it is a secondary kind of almost janitorial responsibility of the cinematographer, the photographer. You know, you have to expose the frame properly, but really what's important is what you're putting in the shot, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and how you're assembling it. And then in cinema, you know, it's how those shots relate to each other. So my favorite part, I mean, the thing that I really enjoy about the process is the conversation with the director about how we're gonna structure the scene. Where we're gonna put the camera, how we're gonna cleave the scene apart. How, when we cross the line, when we're dogmatic with screen direction. How important is it for the audience to understand what's going on in the space and understand the geography of the space, or when is it not relevant, et cetera. Those things I think are deeply psychological and really important for the audience. The lighting kind of thing for me is all informed by those decisions later.
Mhm.
It's like I would love to stand here and be like, oh well, I read the scene and it just the character just seemed green to me, so we lit him green. I just think that's bullshit. I just don't think that's true. And you can tell yourself whatever, but I think, where you put the camera and the relationship and the editorial relationship between shots is far more powerful in terms of the audience's experience than what color the back wall is.
Right.
All the rest of that is just sort of sensibility, and taste, and okay, well, this seems relevant, or realism or hyperrealism or whatever, but for me, it's like, cinema, it is Hitchcock Truffaut. It is the conversation about the assembly of images and how they relate to each other, and that is, like, for me, that's what cinematography is, so yeah, I mean, when it comes to those scenes, that's very much what all of that was about.
Right.
you know
Working with director Fincher, when you have those conversations, do you have a lot of those before filming even begins, or are you going to a set, living there for a second, and then making those decisions? I guess, if there is storyboarding, how strict is the storyboarding?
we generally don't storyboard when I work with David.
Wow.
We speak really quickly to each other, and we're sort of in as a very fast shorthand, from here, right? Yeah, and then we'll do the over, and then the close up, and then we'll get that POV there, and then we're gonna cross the line there. It's this kind of rapid fire thing.
Yeah.
That we've developed over the years. But I think storyboarding is really useful when you have to describe something logistically to 60 people, or you're on a commercial and they're paying by the shot, and the agency wants to make sure that they're getting what they pay for, so it's
Right.
like, but I think it can also be very insulting to actors, because I don't know that you can bring an actor into the space and you can say, okay, you're going to stand there and you're going to look to the left without context for why. And you can show them the storyboard. Well, look at this, and I'm really interested in this background, and I would just want you to stand. I think the actor deserves more than that. I think there's more to it than that. When we go into a space, a set anyway, an interior set where we can control the lighting. It's like, okay, well, what makes sense? Okay, well, Mank has to enter they're all sitting at the dining table, and Mank has to enter, and then he has to give this speech, and he has to walk around, right? And he has to look at all these people, and who does he look at? Okay, well, it makes sense. Hearst should be in the middle. He's hosting the party, he should be in the middle. So that makes, you sort of like lay it out what makes sense, I think. And then you run the scene and you watch and you look at the timing, and then that to me informs the shot design. It doesn't mean you don't go there and say, well, I know we're going to need a wide shot to establish the relationship between everything.
Right.
I know that we're going to need, and I think in the case of that scene anyway, David said, oh, well, I like the idea of him orbiting the congregation,
Yeah.
But that's a discussion that he had with Gary, and that's a discussion he had with the actors, and say, look, I need this, and I want you to stop here and have an interaction. I don't think you get the same scene if you say, look, Gary, you're going to come in, you're going to walk around the table 6 times, and you're going to stop here on this line. I think that's very restrictive for an actor, and I don't know that it yields the best reality. I think you can always find the right shot, or you can find a quote unquote interesting shot, while simultaneously giving the actor room to work out what the scene is. On the other hand, though, I don't think that just means, well, just do whatever you want, we'll follow you either. Right. It sort of has to come holistically. But yeah, I mean, I don't generally think. I mean, I think if you're doing a car chase and you have to figure out which streets to close and where where the stunt driver is going to enter, it's a really good situation for a storyboard.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're doing a really elaborate visual effects sequence where the actors are in front of a green screen and they don't know where to look, and you have to lay out screen direction and show, well, this is the monster's over there. Storyboard's really helpful, or a previs or something. But I think that's sort of the limit of where it starts to become useful.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I mean, we know that Fincher is kind of legendary for doing a lot of takes. And how much of that involves tweaks to the visuals of the film, to the things that you're doing from a camera perspective versus, if it's letting actors get into the right headspace or giving another take or that kind of stuff? How much of that involves your process as well?
I mean, it's everything. It's sculpture.
Yeah.
It's I don't. Well, I mean, first of all, I think it's been slightly hyperbolized.
No.
Okay. Good to
You
know.
know, I mean, there are situations where we do many, and there's situations where we do 10, or 6. There is a process of discovery when you're shooting. I mean, there's a process of discovery when you're setting up and you're rehearsing, right? And then you get the camera in place, and you get the lighting in place, and you get the actor in place, and you run the scene a couple times, and then you start to see things unfold, and God, that was interesting when you paused there. You paused there before, but you didn't do it in the last take. Can we try that again and see? Because that might
It's an
motivate a cut.
evolution. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, I like. Okay, but if you pause there, like maybe we should just put a little bit more light there because I think now we're going to need a close up, and it's like
I like it.
so. I think that's really what we're doing, and it's also refining a dolly move, refining operating, refining composition, maybe changing a lens, things like that. It's like it's a process, and I mean, I have a lot of friends who are actors, and I've been to a lot of plays, and very rarely have I been to a play. The opening, like for example, you go to a play the opening night, and then you go to the closing night, and you go have a drink afterwards, and you celebrate the play. Very rarely has it been better the opening night than it has the closing night. I mean, I would say almost universally, it's always better the last night,
Yeah.
or the very end of the run, because the actors are just more natural. They're not struggling to remember the dialogue. They're not thinking about their next line. It's reflexive. They're not looking for the marks on the floor. The blocking has been refined over the course of, it happens in plays. It's like, God, the last 6 nights I've stopped here, but it really would make a lot more sense if I stopped here. Okay, cool. We're going to adjust the light there. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And, I think the number of takes thing is used against David sometimes as a pejorative. And I just don't understand that. It's like, guys, like, I don't know what you're talking about. This is about making something better almost always, and on the 15th take, you still have the 10th.
Right.
Yeah.
But at least you went there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, look, if the 4th take is better, like it's in the can, man, but we tried, and we didn't find anything better, to me, that's always better than like, well, that's pretty good.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like,
and you're there. I mean, I know maybe it's a little bit more apropos to smaller budget things, but like it's very hard to go back. Like if you're there doing more takes when you're there, because you can never choose footage that you never got. Right.
I mean, why would you spend $50,000 building a set, $20,000 lighting it, bring 60 people there and do 2?
Right.
Like
we nailed it.
Maybe, yeah. Like, you sure? Okay. I mean, look, it doesn't mean spontaneity doesn't have a place, and it's not.
Sure.
Sometimes the second one is the best. Sometimes some actors are like, look, I gotta, someone's crying or they're really emotional and they have to get to, and it's like it takes a long time for them to get there, and you can, but films are made most films, I think, are made in, they're editorially assembled in continuity, and so if you have a scene that requires 6 shots, 6 pieces of coverage or whatever, and it's a really emotional scene. That person's going to have to get there 6 times,
right.
Or maybe, and if they can't, okay, well, that's going to force us to do this in 2 shots. And, it's like all these dynamics affect each other. It's a Venn diagram. It's not,
right.
There's no one size fits all answer,
Yeah.
It makes sense. And sort of bringing it back to the killer, because that's the big thing that we're talking about here for November. And we know that some of the folks in our community have already seen it, which is really exciting. But is there anything that we should know before we go? And when I say that, kind of thinking about your role with the film and what to do, is there something that was in your process that kind of came up to the overall look or visual theme of what's there? What should we know about the killer and how it looks as we go to see it?
The movie is very much a cinematic conversation about subjectivity, I think, and point of view, and it's a character who never allows anyone in his personal space. He's always sort of apart, a distant from, he's hiding amongst everyone else, but he doesn't interact. And I thought that was really interesting to be to put the camera in someone's space where they never allow anybody else. and so we're constantly cutting between his point of view, watching, his target, or watching the world and experiencing the world, not as a participant, but as a silent observer. And then we switch, and now we're silently observing him. That I found particularly interesting. There's very little dialogue in the movie, so there's voiceover, but there's very little dialogue. So it's a character study to some degree, I think.
Love it. I love the shifting perspective there too of the character, and then the audience embodying the character in a way of what he's doing. It's very instructive and interesting. I think we're super excited to see it.
Good. I can't wait to hear what you think.
Awesome. Tommy, did you have any other questions before we wrap up here?
I think I am very happy, and I'm so glad that you were able to join us. This was a wonderful conversation.
My pleasure, guys.
Thank you for being so open to sharing this kind of like the behind the scenes stuff, because that's, kind of what the next reel is about, is kind of going in depth about the whole film and entertainment experience. So we're extremely thankful to have this time with you.
No, my pleasure. Yeah, happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And everybody out there listening to this, the Film Board's going to be taking a look at The Killer, coming out on Netflix on November 10th. We'll be talking about it on the 11th, so you should see something showing up in your feeds shortly after that. For Tommy and myself, we'll talk to you later.